with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Zach Wilson go ahead and introduce our next item on the agenda, which will be a roundtable. Zach?
Yeah, so we can probably start having Marcia pull up her slides, but I am going to moderate our first roundtable of the afternoon. The topic will be industry and startup companies that are associated with universities, and kind of focusing on the safety and regulatory compliance oversight that the universities need to do. We will have three panelists: Marcia Finucane, John Reuter, and Lindsay Link. And the great panelists, the kind of three different institutions and slightly different views, so that will be a good coverage for us. And so Marcia will be speaking first. I'll go ahead and introduce her real quick. So she is the current Biological Safety Officer at the University of Colorado, Denver Anschutz Medical Campus, where she gets the privilege of being my supervisor. She's previously was at the National University of Singapore, where she was the Associate Director in the Office of Safety, Health, and Environment. She's got some good stories from over there. And before that, she was at University of Kentucky, where she was a Biological Safety Officer and responsible official. She administrated the Institutional Biosafety Committee and the Select Agent programs there. She is a certified biological safety professional with several years of biological safety experience, and has participated in national and international workshops and conferences in the areas of biological safety and regulatory compliance. So welcome, Marcia. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Zach. I don't know if you need to see me, and I'm not sure if you can see me. My camera slipped out of adjustments, so but I think you should be able to see my screens.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to give kind of the EHS perspective from working with startups, moving into various phases, and some lessons learned and some advice on if this occurs in your life, what you can take home from that. So just a little bit about the Anschutz Medical Campus. It was initially a Army base. In 1998, it was the Fitzsimmons Army base that was decommissioned. And the Health Science Center that was more in downtown Denver was moved out there in various phases. It's now this lower map. All the red buildings are the new things that have gone up on this base. There's a few that are still there from the original Army base. The main administration building, which was the hospital at the base, and then some barracks where EHS is actually located. Most of our offices are over there. But you can see that it's a very extensive campus. We have about 25,000 employees, and that was before COVID. And now we're operating at about 50%, like everybody else in the state. We have three hospitals on the campus: the University Hospital, the Children's Hospital, and then the VA at the far eastern side of the campus. It has over an $8 billion impact on the economy of the region and the state. It has healthcare professional students in 6 different schools. Many of these are more on the graduate level types of schools. So we have slightly different demographics for our students than many of the institutions that have undergraduates, although we do have some undergraduates. And of course, we have patients coming onto the campus for the hospitals. CU Innovations was an organization started in 2016, and it was a joint venture with UC Health, which is the hospital is a totally different entity, although it has the university in the name. Children's Hospital and the National Mental Health Innovation Center, which was set up as with a national grant. Over the last 3 years, there have been several faculty external startups that have raised over $100 million in capital. 3 of them have gone public, and there are additional startups being formed as we speak. The CU Innovations folks have spoken to more than 500 companies about potential partnerships and co-development opportunities. As far as for those of you who are part of the University of Colorado system, the whole system has over a $5 billion impact on the economy of Colorado. They've had more than 2,000 patent applications. Now, this is for the whole University of Colorado system, and over 60 companies have been formed. And part of this innovation work involves databases, technology licensing, healthcare partnerships. There's an entity that gives grants called the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community, and an investment fund. So in my experience, a typical way that these startups come to be, and then there's, just like our mountains, there are many different ways to get to the top. There are different ways that these startups come into being. But this is a typical sequence that I've seen in several different institutions. We have very innovative research and imaginative and talented researchers on campus who get supported by grants with the indirect costs going to the university for support services. Then the PI wants to concentrate on some particular aspect to commercialize it. So he takes this particular research and perhaps moves to an incubator on campus. And this is similar. There are a lot of universities that have incubators on campus to try to foster the expansion of this kind of research and refine it. Many times the university continues to supply services either in the contract for the incubator, or these services are available by contract. It depends on the institution. And some of these services might be EHS for training and waste disposal, compliance to the fire code, utilities. It might be facilities maintenance and janitorial services, administrative services, access to an office to make copies and print things up, IT support, legal consultations, or just logistical support. And then regulatory compliance, making sure their laboratory is meeting the same standards, at least as the research labs. Some of these incubators and the research going into them may have grant support from federal, state, or university. They're usually for a limited period of time, and it, again, varies. There's always definitely a licensing agreement because the university has some skin in the game now, and so they need to get some payback. So there's some type of agreement there. And it may have university employees working in it. So again, this depending on how your institution defines the duties of EHS, maybe where EHS has responsibilities in this type of facility. Many times they have to learn how to run as GLP, good laboratory practices. And if you've ever dealt with that kind of transition from a regular research lab to GLP, it can be quite a challenge for some people. The ultimate aim is perhaps to get an FDA license, and that is when they would move to GMP, what John had described for his facility. So the next step might be to move to an off-campus site as a completely separate entity. Many times they will do this to gain more flexibility and to be able to tap into venture capital, which is usually not available when they're physically on the university. And they get more autonomy. Some PIs will want to run everything, and some will only want to concentrate on the lab and not worry about the finance part of it. So again, there's a spectrum of arrangements made there. Some may still have grant support from that Fitzsimmons Innovation Center. They may be getting some grant support from that, something like that. And again, they may still have university employees working in it. So again, the university's got a tie to it because they have people working in this off-campus entity. But generally, they're responsible for all of the regulatory compliance, the OSHA, the waste disposal, contracts, legal, licensing, IT, training, and that may be contracted with EHS and the university. But if they're moving to GLP, they really have to have strong documentation, and inspections are really part of that, especially to assure quality. So what are the boundaries of the responsibility? How much is assumed that EHS will do? How much, where do you draw the line? If you define the role of EHS as taking care of everybody with a university badge, that can get quite a gray area. If it can be depend on how EHS is funded. Is it funded from the indirect cost of research grants? If this new entity doesn't have research grants and it's not paying indirect cost, so how are they going to pay for EHS services? Perhaps EHS is funded from a surcharge on items that are purchased that create a waste stream. I've been in an institution where that happened. Or maybe there's direct state funding for EHS. So sometimes that can come into play as to where the boundaries are for EHS. But things can go into the gray area, and there are many shades of gray pretty quickly. Perhaps the university is leasing the space. Does that define that EHS has responsibilities there? Again, if the university is tied to this in any way, they're going to have some skin in the game, whether they want it or not, because their name will appear on the headline if something bad happens. So in the best case scenario, there's an MOU or there a contract that spells out exactly what the responsibilities are, what fees are charged, if any, and who does what, basically. And EHS would advise on the selection and design of the facility and help set up the laboratory and contracts with the waste contractors and help set up regulatory compliance systems and mechanisms. And perhaps they're contracted for the training in chemical waste, and they may perform the annual inspections or more frequent inspections. In the worst case scenario, EHS has no knowledge of the entity and no input. And they only find out about this new laboratory when there's a large chemical spill or a personal injury. And the very worst case, EHS reads about the injury or regulatory violations in the news media. And that's what keeps us in biosafety up on Saturday nights into the wee hours sometimes, is worrying about the very worst case scenario. So the bottom line is somebody could be seriously injured. And if there are, as I said before, if there are any connections with the university, however tenuous, that will be in the headline. So it's in everybody's interest to be proactive. Find out who or what at your institution works with startups and incubators and development. Sell the advantages of bringing EHS in early to the discussions before there's some kind of incident. Develop a fact sheet about EHS services and issues for startups and incubators. Develop a cost center fee schedule for most common services you provide. Perhaps the university contracts with a bio-waste provider, disposal company. And you can how do you pass those costs on if you're going to coordinate that for the company? And read the university newsletters about the latest, greatest research, gadgets, and develop relationships with PIs that you hear through the grapevine are thinking about developing a startup. So let me give you an example, a kind of a case study. The previous speaker spoke of the Gates manufacturing facility. They are a university entity. They have university people working in there. However, they do pay for their own contracts. And the university does supply some services to them. Some of EHS services are supplied without a fee, and some of them are with a fee. But this had to be worked out because initially it was a very gray area, and it took some back and forth to kind of work out the present situation. They have large biofermenters with large volumes. I have 50 gallons there. I think actually they have one that goes up to 500 gallons. And the type of oversight that applies to what they're doing, it depends on if it's research, if it's product development and is considered research. The NIH guidelines in Appendix K for large volume and may apply. If it's manufacturing, then the FDA probably would take jurisdiction over this. And so it really depends on the projects. They have basically two processes that they do. One is protein production and recombinant E. coli, and then there's purification, et cetera. And again, this can be different volumes from just a typical tissue culture volumes up to a large biofermenter. And then they also do cell therapies. For instance, the CAR T cell therapies for cancer. And so they have two kind of umbrella protocols that have gone to the IBC on campus. And as a particular project comes in, they will do an amendment to that umbrella approval to cover the specifics of this project, should it be a little bit different. They operate at BSL-2. We have no select agents, and they are primarily an FDA-compliant organization, and so they don't bring any bugs in. They don't want any bacteria other than their recombinant E. coli, like K12 strains in there. Our institution decided that they would fall under the IBC, and that took some negotiations and back and forth. And we had to create new forms based on the NIH guidelines for Section 3C for some of the human trial materials they're producing. Some of those trials are for clients, or materials are for clients. Clinical trials, again, phase 1 and 2. And some of them are for clinical trials that are being run on through our medical center. We developed new procedures for tracking the protocols for numbering and how to handle the amendments. And the clinical trials that are run on our campus also have to coordinate through the IRB review process for human subjects. But we also have at least 2 hospitals that might be involved with this clinical trial. So there would be an adult amendment, and then there would be a child pediatric amendment, because there would be some differences in those clinical trials. So the IBC would review the protocol because it's going through the manufacturing process, and then it reviews it because it's a clinical trial using recombinant materials. We get to see both aspects of those clinical trials. One thing we've learned in trying to learn about what FDA requirements are, of course, that's GMP, good manufacturing procedures, and they have hundreds of SOPs. Gates uses an electronic platform for all of their SOPs, which are secured behind many firewalls. And so when we were going through the review process in the IBC, we'd say, well, send us this SOP and that SOP. Well, they refer to each other, so it rapidly expanded, and trying to transfer all of those in a PDF format, the email system just couldn't even handle it. So they actually delivered the relevant SOPs on a thumb drive, but everything was extremely secure and confidential. For biosafety SOPs, the main things that we were interested in were, what were their inactivation procedures? Did they use heat or chemical for the remainder of the materials, or for cleaning out their vessels? Because they do have stainless steel biofermenters. Some of them are collapsible plastic containers, like was shown for the CSU procedures, but some of them, they do use a stainless steel. And so they will need to clean those. And what's their process for doing that? And how are they going to dispose of these? Are they going to discharge this into the sewer? Do they have to neutralize if they're using a chemical disinfectant? Are there sewer permits that have to be gotten? Are they going to collect this? And then how are they going to get rid of this material? And then spill response. What would trigger a response from EHS? And when would they call in the municipal hazmat response because of a spill of some sort? They do use some caustic chemicals. They have corrosives and acids, and not in huge quantities, but they do more than just regular lab quantities. And so if there was a spill of those, how would that be handled? So we had to become familiar, at least to some degree, with the FDA requirements. You really have to have institutional support to help define the responsibilities and the boundaries for who does what. There's usually an annual shutdown for these facilities for preventive maintenance, and that's a good time to plan audits and walkthroughs when they're not up and working in clean room conditions. And make sure everyone in EHS is on the same page. If you have one set of people who take care of chemical waste disposal and another that does the lab inspections for chemical storage, and you may have biosafety that has jurisdiction over the biofermenters, all of those people need to be coordinated together and make sure that you're getting on the same page with when you present information and when you do your inspections of the facility. So in summary, there are many different paths and configurations of relationships between startups and universities. My advice is to network within your campus, educate upper administration about the capabilities of EHS and their limitations, be flexible, be patient, persistent, approachable, and last, take deep breaths many times a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Just want to let the audience know, go ahead and put your questions in that chat function. We're going to hold off answering questions until after the three panelists have spoke, and then they can all answer questions as needed. If you have a question specifically focused on one panelist, go ahead and note that in your question. So next up is John Buder, is a research professor and assistant vice chancellor of research integrity and compliance and the institutional official and research integrity officer at University of Colorado Boulder. He received a master in preventative veterinary medicine and doctorate of veterinary medicine at University of California, Davis, and he became a diplomat of the American College of Laboratory Animal Medicine at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So John at CU Boulder works with the Research Innovation Office and has oversight of research integrity and compliance at the university. He is actively involved in oversight of the university's affairs, including Office of Animal Resources and Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, the Institutional Review Board as well. He, as a professor in psychology and neuroscience, he participates in many collaborative research investigations in the field of neuroscience, integrative physiology, wildlife ecology, microbiome, and comparative medicine research. So it'll be great to get his perspective of what they have going on at CU Boulder. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Zach. Can everybody hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have a very short slide deck intentionally because I'm hoping to have some discussion afterwards on some of the topics we covered today. I have many different hats, as Zach said, at the university. One is an administrative hat, another is a veterinary hat, and another is faculty hat. And so I see all kinds of situations and opportunities, and my job is to support research however I can. So just to kind of set the stage here, I work at CU Boulder, and we have a very large campus, about 35,000 undergraduates, with a variety of educational topics, majors, grad students, postdocs. We are ranked nationally in several different areas, spanning the spectrum from quantum physics and atomic molecular physics to audiology and earth sciences. We have a lot of other humanities as well that also engage in extracurricular activities and startups. So it's not just the physical sciences that we deal with, but it's all across the board here. We have a very sound track record of startup companies developed within the university that then spin off into private or commercialized entities. Since 1994, we've had 112 of those companies go through, and they are very successful at raising venture capital and other seed funds to promote their startup costs, which can be considerable at times. One of our stated missions is to innovate and be an entrepreneurship university. And in that process, we look for opportunities on our unique research to license or to develop further into translational mechanisms. Unlike Anschutz, we don't have a medical center and we don't do a lot of translational research, but we do partner with them. We have a new Nexus AB program set up with Central University that is designed to promote cross-campus collaborations from the basic research, basic science that Boulder specializes in to the clinical fields, which Anschutz takes the lead on. Along with our undergraduates and our faculty, we have a very large number of research institutes, which are separate entities that are affiliated with the university. And these institutes will oftentimes co-appoint faculty in both a college on campus as well as the institutes. And primarily, their driver is 100% research. And they look for external funding to support that, and we work very closely with them on the campus to support their needs all across the boards. A lot of the activity and the heavy lifting when we have ideas and licensing and spin-offs goes through what we call venture partners on our campus. And they have a very robust system, as you can see here, of the timelines, of training materials for the faculty, of bringing in founders and hosting events for these startups so they can sell their ideas to venture capitalists, to other foundings in the area. And so it's nuts and bolts from beginning to the end, where we promote and sponsor and support these investments. And we have very liberal license agreements at the university where the founder and the faculty who do all the heavy lifting and have invented share a significant revenue stream with the university. So we want this to be a win-win situation. We both have something invested in it, and we both end up on the winning side of things. This is just a quick chart of our startups, and we're on track to be the biggest startup year ever in this last fiscal year, which is ironic considering what we all lived through. And we don't see this slowing down at all, and we're expanding our robustness and are reaching out to especially new faculty with some of these key concepts and timelines and kind of charts on how they can take their research ideas and move it in to a faster speed if they want to commercialize it. This is just another example of all the different types of stages we have for our companies, as well as the different areas. I think this might be my last slide. These are some examples. So these are companies that generated ideas from faculty, and they were developed in-house, and then we worked with the faculty to promote them and get them out into the commercial realm. We also host on campus many companies that are not necessarily affiliated with the university, but that lease space, that don't have faculty. And how we manage both of those entities are somewhat different. If there's a faculty tie and it's an in-house developed company, their faculty hat gives them access to many of our resources on campus for no extra charge. And that might be iCook, IRB, conflicts of interest, export controls. So I manage all these research compliance things and work with them carefully on it. One thing I want to say about the in-house started companies that we deal with a lot is the conflicts of interest and commitment disclosure. Many of these companies will use resources on the campus, they'll use students, and there's a gray line between what is a company endeavored behavior and what is a university endeavored behavior. And so we have an annual disclosure process where they tell us about this company and what they plan to do and who's going to be doing it. And depending on what they say in that disclosure, oftentimes we'll push that to what we call a management plan, which is it's an agreement between us and the faculty and the entity how resources will be divided. If students are used, can they publish or not? Is it for educational credit or not? Is the faculty member in charge of the company also the one giving the grade for the student, which could be a conflict? Also, if there's resources that are being spent from the company, we usually also like to have what we call a fiscally disinterested party, which means it's usually not the faculty or anybody in the company that has the decision-making authority on spending money or bringing money in. It's usually somebody else with a department chair that will oversee these and make sure there's no bias and that the university resources are used appropriately. For entities that are outside the company, we always do an MOU with them to establish expectations. Because they're on university property, there is a definite brand reputational risk if something goes wrong, and so we require them to adhere to all our policies. So the MOU spells out our expectations of compliance and adherence to our policies, but it also spells out, depending on the type of research they're doing, if they're going to be using the animal resources, if they're going to be using human resources, and what kind of cost or fee structure that would be in. So, we as a university do a lot of subsidizing of faculty research labs and research such as electricity and buildings and EH&S. All these are part of the hat you wear as a member of the university community. But if you're an outside entity that comes through, then we are under a mandate to fully cost recover our expensive, and that can be very tricky at times. And so not only is there a lease agreement with the square footage, but as others have said, EH&S is a very important component of that. We kind of divvy out responsibilities. So if they're on campus and they're doing any human or animal research, they have to go through our policies, they have to go through our review, and they participate in all our audits. And then if they have issues with that, usually we can correct that, or they have an option to leave campus if they want, if they can't follow our expectations. We don't ask for a lot, but we ask for regulatory compliance, and we like for communication. But most of the time with these companies, it is a faculty and a very high level decision of whether or not they come to campus. Research space can be at a premium, especially when there's a lot of recruitment going on and expansion of the faculty. And so it's a very thoughtful, high-level decision on whether or not to bring a company in. And if we do, then there's all the stakeholders that are involved sit around the table and talk about what the expectations are, what the timelines are, and what the cost will be, so there's no surprises on the back end. So that's a high-level summary of how we manage kind of external entities and ingrown housing. My expertise, like I said, is the research compliance side of things for both of those entities. But I'll leave it to others to talk about some of the other facets of supporting those programs on campus.
I can introduce Lindsay Link now. She is gotten her PhD in infectious disease and epidemiology and a Master of Engineering in Biomedical Engineering from Colorado State University. She took some of her work from there and co-founded and is now CEO of Cyvec Biotechnologies, a company based in Fort Collins, Colorado. They have a tissue-specific nucleic acid delivery platform for therapeutic and vaccine development. I'm excited to hear more about what Cyvec does, and I can work with CSU.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate the introduction. Well, you introduced me so well, I hardly need to give any more background on who we are and what we're doing. But just briefly, yes, I represent Cyvec Biotechnologies. We're working on developing a delivery system for nucleic acid therapies and vaccines. And just to recap a little bit, Zach, again, you gave a great intro to who I am, but my background, I am a CSU alum. I did my undergraduate work here. I did a master's in engineering, and then I went on and did my PhD. I actually did my postdoc too. So I have a long history with the university. I currently am a university PI, so I have a small kind of affiliation still with the university and have a research laboratory at the veterinary teaching hospital. And so I do, of course, have an MOU and a conflict of interest. I have all that established because I am also the CEO of Cyvec Biotechnologies, which is a spin-out company from the university. So let's see here. We'll go to the next page. So a little bit more about Cyvec. As I said, we are a spin-out company. We were founded in 2016, and what I don't have on here is that we do have an exclusive license to some of the technology that was developed while I was doing my doctorate work, and so that was largely sort of the catalyst for starting the company, is kind of taking it from the basic and research step to kind of the clinical and translational aspect and wanting to actually commercialize this technology that we licensed. We are funded, the majority, if not all of our funding is from NIH, NIAID funding. We are located at the Research Innovation Center, so out at the Foothills campus at Colorado State University. Beautiful location. And we have office and laboratory space leased there. We have been there since mid-2017. And we are a discovery and preclinical phase company. So we're not doing any clinical work, but we do a lot of work in vitro and in vivo, and I'll go into that a little bit further. But our research focus is on working and developing nucleic acid therapeutics, and specifically therapies that could be used for infectious diseases. And really, we specialize in viral infectious disease. And in order to do that and to develop these therapies, we're working on developing a drug delivery platform. So don't want to bore you and go into too much detail about what this platform is about, but I think it's kind of important to kind of set just some background on what kind of things we work with in the lab and at SciVac. But our drug delivery platform is a very interesting one. It's very out of the box, similar to how you can use nature and harness it for animal and human medicine, like you could use a viral vector to deliver material. We're using bacteria. So we use non-pathogenic bacteria. These are K12 strains of bacteria, so we consider them to be non-safe, non-pathogenic. But we do a lot of bacterial genetics and engineering so that these bacteria, they make the nucleic acid that we program them to make. So we program them, and then we have further engineered them to deliver these nucleic acid drugs to specific tissues. Of course, one of our areas is the respiratory tissues that we're able to target. And then it can go on, after it's dumped this payload of nucleic acid, it can go on and facilitate that therapeutic effect. So that's kind of in a nutshell how our delivery system works that we're working on. But we've got a lot of different areas that, it's a platform system, a lot of different areas of research and development that we're focused on. So for an example, using this delivery system for CRISPR, Cas9, and other nuclease editing tools, the delivery of those tools, using it for the delivery of mRNA, not only for protein replacement, but for vaccines. And then another area that we really excel in is the use of this delivery system to deliver short hairpin or siRNAs for an RNAi gene silencing effect. So there's a lot of different disease indications that we could use our technology for, but the one that we are focused on right now is influenza, and that's where we've got the funding through a phase 2 small business innovative research grant through the NIH to develop an siRNA therapeutic for influenza. We would like to expand this and do other viral infectious diseases, as well as genetic disorders. We just have not gotten there yet. Right now we're focused on strictly flu-based applications. So you might be wondering what kind of agents and materials and animals and cells we work with, and I would say we work with a lot. There's a lot of different agents. Well, let me just start with this. We work with a lot of different immortalized human and non-human cell lines. So we do a lot of work in vitro, start in vitro. We do animal studies, so we work with mice, and we've done quite a bit of work in the past with chickens. We work with type A influenza virus, so this is both avian as well as human, and I should specify we do low path avian flu, so no high path. So any type A that's non-H7 or an H5 strain of virus. But we do, as I mentioned, a lot of bacterial genetics, a lot of bacterial cloning and manipulation with E. coli. We do work with non-exempt recombinant DNA. And also, as I mentioned, we do work with CRISPR, Cas9 applications, and then RNAi. So, we do a lot. Work with a lot of agents, and I shouldn't say agents. We work with one type of infectious agent right now, but we do a lot of work in vitro and in vivo. And of course, this has been important to work with the university with research compliance and the university services. And so for an example, we do work with EHS we're not currently generating any chemical waste, but when that time does come, we know what process we need to go through in order to get a satellite accumulation center set up within our laboratory. And we do have guidelines on how to go about reporting. We do generate biohazardous waste, and we go through training through the IDRC, and this is part of the IDRC orientation training, where all employees that are using equipment, autoclaves, are trained on how to use those properly. But we've gone through used the IBC and through RICRO at the university and gone through IBC to establish our protocols. So this is both for our agent as well as the project protocols. And I can talk a little bit further about that because there's been things that we've had to work out and navigate. Again, it's because I'm not only a university PI, but I also am affiliated with the company as well. In terms of just facility maintenance for in our lab and our office, of course, it's included as part of our lease at the RIC, janitorial services. We have also, of course, because we work with animals, we've gone through the IACUC. We've used the IACUC at the university, and all of our animals protocols have been approved that way. It's very convenient for us to do this work through CSU. Because of where we're housed at the IDRC, we've got animal facilities downstairs, so it's very convenient. But there has been definitely some things that we've had to navigate together, working together at the university. For example, we have to get interinstitutional assurance, a form that needs to be filed with OLA, and this is provided with CSU by CSU and the IACUC committee. And this is something that I know CIVAC kind of was the guinea pig of going through that process, so I'm happy to talk further about what that looked like and what is required. But we also, all of our employees go through the occupational health risk assessment. If there is a risk that is identified, we do that independently, so we're looking at contracting with UC Health in order to do things like fit testing and other requirements in that regard. And we use quite a bit of the CSU core facilities as well. So those have been services that have been really beneficial to us. And just kind of as a disclaimer here, CIVAC we do have our own environmental liability and general business insurance as well as workers' comp. So that's something that prior to becoming a tenant at the Research Innovation Center, we needed to provide that particular environmental liability and the business insurance. So just to, I guess, talk just briefly about some of the gray areas and challenges that we've had to navigate. And again, this is just from my own experience. It might be different for other companies. And I should say we've navigated these, so we are now in the know. We understand what the process is for the most part. Although with the one caveat there being kind of fee structure, that seems to be something that sort of the fee structure expectations I think there could be areas where that could be a little bit better outlined for companies that come in, startup companies. I know that there's been a lot of integration and interaction with the business department to establish this. And an example would be with the IACUC and going through IACUC approvals and IBC protocols, establishing that and knowing that, hey, I am a university PI, but if my company is using these services, how are those being covered? Because obviously, when we're bringing in money through the NIH, when CIVAC is, we're not, CSU is not a subcontract, so there is no indirect cost there. So what I'm trying to say is knowing these fee structures is important so that when startup companies are applying for state and federal support, we know how to budget that into our budgets and how to include that and what those costs are. So things like additional things that have kind of been a little bit unclear for us are things like biosafety cabinet certifications. Who's doing that? Who's responsible for that going forward? Right now, the RIC has provided that, but what does the future look like? Lab inspections with EHS, a little bit of a gray area there on how often those lab inspections would occur. What would be the cost associated with that, other than knowing that we would be responsible for the cost of disposal. Trainings, we've now worked this out, but kind of needing to know, costs for doing things like, BSC training with our employees and lab audits. One thing that wasn't entirely clear to us in the beginning, but is very crystal clear now, is that we needed to go through a BSL 1 audit as well as a 2 audit. So just some things up front that, regarding fee structures and expectations that would be beneficial to companies that are coming in and that were a little bit gray for us. And then the other thing I want to just highlight is IBC protocol. So we realized in working with CSU, and what's kind of complex is that when a PI has a joint affiliation, which that's me, not only with the university, but, with a private company, knowing what hat the PI is wearing at what time, especially when there's overlap and you've got licensed technologies, but there's overlap in activity and what's happening. We determined, working with the university, that a best practice is just to have separate IBC approvals. And largely it doesn't matter, if there's a lot of redundancy in that, in the protocols, but just to keep them separate altogether was the best way to go forward with that. And then additional resources, let's see. Yep. Additional resources that CIVEC provides, just to let you know, we do, all of our CIVEC employees that come in do receive a copy of the CSU Biosafety Handbook, so that's important that they have that. In addition, they do get employee handbooks as well, so this outlines safety practices and procedures for dealing or reporting incidents at CIVEC. So of course, this would be happening on CSU's campus, but what are the steps you take if there is something to report while you're on CIVEC's clock? We do onboarding training, so we do general lab conduct, safety, and maintenance training, and then we do background checks as well. And I only mention that because it's important. If we are giving them access to facilities at the university and they're granting that access, we provide the background checks as well for that. And then finally, just to summarize some of the areas where we've had really good, clear guidelines and support as a startup company. In general, when we have a question and we don't know who to contact for additional information or support, we have good resources to get that information. So through the Research Innovation Center, the incubator where we're at, we can send an email out to the coordinators and ask, hey, we've got a question related to this area, and they're really good about putting us in contact with who we need to discuss certain issues with. We've really appreciated that we can use university receiving and mailing services. I mention this just because, that as a laboratory that's working in receiving a lot of materials, and that's definitely a benefit. We are not shipping any dangerous goods or receiving anything at any point in the future where we do. If that does become a need, I know what kind of training we need to go through to be compliant with the university in that regard. We've had support with CSU students that have been employed by the university, but have then transitioned from no longer a CSU employee. They've graduated, and now they're going to become CIVEC employees. So the university has helped with kind of establishing that affiliate status that's necessary to have access to training and other resources online, but as well as kind of walking us through the background checks and whatnot. We've worked closely with the biosafety office, and we greatly appreciate the support and the insight that they've provided us. They do have provided a comprehensive laboratory audit checklist, and we found that to be very helpful. And just ensuring that we are, completely up to date with our research compliance and all the other needs that are necessary. We've worked with the RICRO as well, and IBC and IACUC, again, really good. After we've kind of worked out some of the different challenges, I should say, just really good communication. And I would just say, earlier, the topic of just being patient and be patient with us as we work through this. We've received a lot of patience and a lot of understanding and a lot of support. So definitely appreciative of that. The other thing that has been good for the tenant companies is that there's a monthly tenant meeting. And this is a great opportunity for other companies, for all of us to come together and talk about, talk about some of these gray areas, where we need extra support. Some of these meetings we've brought in, the business office has come in, for example, and said, hey, we're working with IPEC to set up a fee strategy moving forward. And so kind of what that protocol is if you've got new animal study that's coming in or new funding, and you need to get that approvals, this is sort of the protocol and the process to go through. And then the other thing I just want to mention that's been really wonderful is as a tenant company at the Research Innovation Center, they provide a student intern grant. So it's a really interesting opportunity where they provide the company with an account that can be used for purchasing materials and supplies. That it's a university account, but with the understanding that we would hire at least one, not SciVac shouldn't hire, doesn't need to hire, but we would hire through the university at least one student. And so that's been a really beneficial program for us as well, and I think a great opportunity for students too. And like I said, several of these students have transitioned from being student to actually being employed. So.
Biosafety and quality are opposite of each other in terms of differential air pressure. Safety wants negative rooms versus production wants it in positive rooms. So basically, the question is, how do you resolve the situation? So how do you have a clean room that is also a containment room? Any of the panelists want to tackle that one?
I can step in here. One of the things that Gates put in their manufacturing facility is an anteroom. So the anteroom is negative to the hallway, but the inner room is positive to the anteroom. So the anteroom is kind of acts as that transition area between those two.
Having a negative pressure shell around a positive pressure room.
Yep.
For Marcia, how do you recommend entities like EHS and other university administrative departments all get on board with creating a consistent set of expectations for startups? There has been a history of EHS getting left out of these talks.
So that's where your internal networking comes into play. That's why EHS needs to internally decide what kind of services do they provide to the campus, and how do they sell those, and how do they get recognition through their administration to gain value in their eyes and realize that EHS needs to be involved. I'll tell you if there's a silver lining for this COVID thing, I think one of the things that's happened is that EHS, no matter where you are, has really been in the forefront of helping the campuses deal with this challenge, and so has a much higher profile with people at the top of the administration hierarchy. And at least on our campus, I think we've really proven our worth. And going forward, I think we've also formed relationships with people that we had never interacted with before. So I think that's one of the things. And then also determining what does it cost to give a training? And some of that is just, you have to determine it internally. But it's also, you have to sell yourself to the upper administration.
A couple more questions. Are the faculty who also have companies able to separate their operations physically? Are they separated from other companies, or do you share spaces? And that's for any panelist.
I can take that one. So in the early years, they were in the same space, and we have these management plans to delineate who's going to be working with that company, whether it's students or they're going to hire their own staff, and what resources they may or may not use. As they get more advanced and require more space that might not be available, then they'll move to an off-site location, which is a lot easier to maintain. But there are very blurred lines in the middle, especially with inventions, patents, licenses that were generated as part of the basic research program, oftentimes federally funded grants. And so it's important to have these hard conversations in the beginning to find out what their goals are, how much time they're going to be dedicated to that entity, whether or not it's still falling under a basic research or if it's actually a commercialization entity. And those will vary on a case-by-case basis depending on who you deal with and what the product is.
Okay. Do your institutions have a mechanism to itemize usage of various resources? Is this an a la carte structure?
Well, I can take that one too, if you can hear me. So it's a la carte. So if you're doing recombinant DNA research, you're going to go through the IRB, and they're going to pay a fee for the review and the audits and all the other processes involved with that and the training. And then if you do that recombinant DNA and then want to put it in a mouse, for example, then you're going to have an agreement with our Office of Animal Resources that delineates the per diem rates and the policies and the access to the labs and the training as well. And so we have for external entities, we have a initial administrative fee cost recovery that deals with the communications, the setup, the coordination, the initial meetings, the time that was spent, understanding the goals and the timelines of the research. And then we have a sub fee that is attached to IRB or IBC or the animal use section. And so they don't have to use all of that. If they don't use it, they won't be charged for it. But each entity then works with the organization and invoices them separately.
Okay. And then a couple more questions here. How are penalties for the institution addressed for non-compliance of an incubator company?
So that's me again, I suppose. I can do it, and then Marcia can go forward. So non-compliance, we deal like any other non-compliance. And so if they are found during a lab audit to have safety issues, or they're doing research that has not been approved through the proper channels, they will be expected to comply like any other faculty, and they'll be called out, and they may have to enter the committee. There might be an associated fee associated with correcting and monitoring their actions. So, for example, if they have an animal welfare issue that's reported to OLAW, and part of our response is we're going to go retrain them and then monitor them with a trained technician to make sure that they're handling properly, we'll recharge for that. So the company will pay for all the extra expenses needed to ensure their compliance.
Marcia, did you want to respond to that as well?
Yeah, so I think that's an issue that we're actually kind of still working through. But I think it would be basically the same kind of setup. But yeah, we're still working on that.
And then we have one last question. Does your institution register the IBCs for each incubator?
I'll take a stab at that one. And so our IBC covers recombinant DNA as well as any pathogen or hazard work with the biological organism on campus. And so if they have one of those two criteria, they have to have an IBC separate protocol that delineates who's going to be on it, what they're going to be doing, and what the safety aspects are going to be. And then the committee reviews it to make sure it's within our expectations and understanding. If they don't have any of that, then we do not have a separate IBC registration process.